Welcome back. In the previous lecture, we looked at the functional anatomy of the GI tract. Now we are going to look at the functional anatomy of some of our accessory organs. And we've already sort of talked about some of our accessory organs, things like the tongue and teeth and salivary glands. So here we're focusing primarily on the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder. So this is what the liver looks like. It's a multi-lobed organ. It's the biggest gland in your body. So you have a left lobe, a caudate lobe, a right lobe, and then a quadrate lobe, so four-lobed liver. Sort of the primary function in terms of the liver, in terms of the digestive system, is the fact that it produces bile. Bile is what we call an emulsifier for fat, which means it breaks sort of fat droplets into smaller fat droplets. There are, of course, other things that the liver does for us. All of the nutrients, or at least a good chunk of our nutrients from the digestive system, when they are absorbed by the small intestine, are routed to the liver via the hepatic portal vein, so that the liver can process those nutrients, primarily proteins and amino acids and nucleotides, things like that. The liver is where our lipid-soluble vitamins get stored, and then the liver also does some detox for us. The gallbladder is this tiny little organ here. It's just sort of a little sac. It stores bile. You can live without your gallbladder. You just sort of have to watch your fat intake for a little while because you don't have a little extra bile that the liver would or that the gallbladder would normally store. The gallbladder is connected to the bile duct via the cystic duct here. So initially when bile is made by the liver, it travels through what we call the common hepatic duct. The cystic duct branches off the common hepatic duct and goes to the gallbladder, and then what was the common hepatic duct sort of continues on to the small intestine as the bile duct. Each of the lobes of the liver are actually composed of these little hexagonal shaped lobules. So microscopically, the liver is quite a unique looking organ because each little lobe has this sort of hexagon shape to it. Blood comes in through the portal vein. That is bringing the sort of nutrient rich but oxygen poor blood from the rest of the GI tract, but you're also getting oxygen-rich blood from the hepatic artery, so that the liver itself has oxygen in order to do its job. It travels sort of centrally through these little sinusoidal capillaries to the central vein of each lobule, and then each lobule is drained by a central vein. Each of these central veins drains into an interlobular vein, and ultimately all of the interlobular veins will drain into the hepatic vein, which ultimately drains the liver into the vena cava. So that's how sort of blood flows through, carrying that nutrient-rich blood from the GI tract and the digestive organs, and also oxygen-rich blood from the aorta. When bile is made by the liver cells, it travels through what we call cannuliculi into a very small little bile duct, and the little portal venule, the little portal arteriole, and the little bile duct is known as the portal triad, and each of the corners of the hexagon have a little portal triad with them. Bile itself is sort of this amphipathic derivative of cholesterol, and what it does is emulsification for fats. So it's really, really necessary for us to absorb, to digest and absorb fatty foods, to first break it down into smaller pieces. So here you can see you've got this big sort of non-polar, big old fat droplet. Well, you know, most of our digestive juices are very polar, very sort of water-based. And so the bile salts, since they are amphipathic, they have a side that likes the water, they have a side that doesn't like the water, sort of coat the big fat droplet, and that breaks it into all these little tiny droplets, so that we've got much smaller pieces now for our enzymes to actually go and start to work on. Bile also contains bilirubin, which is a pigment that was formed originally from heme. When we break down the heme of our hemoglobin, we get bilirubin. Bilirubin is further broken down by the intestinal bacteria to something called stercobilin, which is a brown color, and that is why our feces are brown. Sort of remnants of the hemoglobin that was carrying our oxygen on our red blood cells. The pancreas we looked at once before as part of the endocrine system, but now we are looking at its digestive function. So we're looking at not the islet that produces the insulin and glucagon, our blood sugar regulating hormones, but the acinar portion of the pancreas, which is going to produce what we call zymogens. And zymogens are essentially they're sort of baby enzymes, basically. They're a bunch of inactive enzymes. The acinar also produces bicarbonate, because remember, the stomach acid is very acidic. The small intestine does not have that thick mucosal barrier like the stomach, and so we need to neutralize some of that acidity from the stomach acid. So we're getting these little protoenzymes and the bicarbonate into some tiny little ducts, and those ducts will ultimately lead to the pancreatic duct, which will ultimately dump into the duodenum. So the pancreatic juice is very watery. It is very alkaline. Got a lot of bicarbonate in it. Again, we're trying to neutralize some of that stomach acid. It does have a lot of electrolytes in it. Again, primarily the bicarbonate. And then all of our digestive enzymes. So we've got things like trypsin and chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase, and we've got amylase proteins and nuclease proteins and lipase proteins. Again, typically sort of released in an inactive format, particularly those protein digesting enzymes that will become activated once they're in the lumen of the small intestine. You can see this is sort of how they all sort of relate to each other, these three organs. You can see here's the liver, there's the common hepatic duct, the cystic duct leading to the gallbladder. The common hepatic duct then continues bringing the bile to the small intestine. Here is that triangular shaped sort of pancreas. There's that main pancreatic duct, which again is going to take us to the small intestine, the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum.